Welcome to the Kitchen Table, a show dedicated to helping you escape diet culture, gain trust with food, honor your body, and live a brighter life. Hello and welcome back to the Kitchen Table. I am so glad you're here. I'm your host, Alicia Brown, an anti-diet registered dietitian nutritionist. And today I've got my girlfriend here, Selena. I am so excited to have Selena here on the show with us at the Kitchen Table. Her and I got certified together through the Let Your Body Lead professional certification program with Casey Berglund over at Worthy and Well. Casey's been on the show before. I've talked about Worthy and Well all the time on the show. Gosh, that program was just so amazing. And Selena and I, we've been friends for about a year. Is that right, Selena?
Yeah, probably more than a year now because
That's
we
right.
did the first little mini Let Your Body Lead before the certification. So
That's
that would have
right.
been
That was,
like September?
it might have been September of, oh my God, happy friendiversary.
Happy friendiversary.
And we're here talking today all about burnout, life fatigue, and like energy management. Because of course, if we are burnt out in life, we're feeling low energy, everything is starting to feel really hard in life. Like doing even our regular everyday things, if it takes a little bit more effort, if we're not really feeling up to the things that we usually feel like light us up, that affects the ways that we perceive our bodies, right? And it affects us in the way that we feed ourselves. And of course, food and body stuff services in the process of that. Oftentimes that life fatigue like translates into maybe furthering the food and body stuff that we're struggling with too. And so today we're going to be talking about that on the show. And Selena's going to share about her life experience and maybe how burnout has affected you right now, Selena, in your life. Do you care to share a little bit more about yourself and about how this is affecting you maybe right now or has in the past?
Yeah, thank you, Alicia, for having me on. Yeah, burnout. I feel like it's just such a big buzzword right now. Like 2020 has been tough for a lot of people, but so good and so illuminating in so many ways. So like Alicia said earlier this year, we did the Let Your Body Lead certification together. And I am just so interested in everything wellness, everything listening to your body, feeling your body, understanding what that means. And that has actually been so helpful to have during this year of like challenges.
Yeah.
So a little bit about like how has burnout affected me this year? I thought about this earlier today and I'm like, I feel like there's multiple points where burnout came through as my body just saying, nope, no more of that. We're done. And I think that's probably the definition of burnout is like, we literally just can't do anymore. And really it's just like, and I always thought before this year that it would be like, I'm working really hard. I'm not sleeping. I'm run. And I just like I get it done and then I drop. I feel like for many this year, it has been illuminated that it's actually just like, Alicia, I'm sure you've talked about the window of tolerance lots on this podcast.
Yes.
But a reminder is that we all have this window that we're peak operating in, and we're all kind of going on a wave in this window, and above is hyper arousal, which is your a survival mechanism of fright, flight, freeze. Below is your feigned death, your tiredness, whatever. I feel like this year, the way burnout is manifesting and has manifested for me is just like that narrowing of that window so subtly every day. And after every like little change that it's just like, my window is so tiny that there's no way for me to stay in this window. You relate to this, Alicia?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, just like really clearly, like talking about like what burnout actually is and how that relates to like our prime operating window, you could say, or like where we're acting in alignment with like who we are and have the energy to do all the things that we need to do. that window I think is like narrower when we're like short on sleep, when we're hitting like a mental wall, right? Like, like when we're feeling really disconnected from the body, when we're coming from like a very disembodied place. Maybe earlier there were cues from our body saying like, hey, I'm a little bit tired. Hey, I'm kind of mentally going through a tough time right now. And we just continue to say, nope, nope, nope. I'm going to distract myself from those thoughts and distract myself from those body sensations. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing through. And that narrows that window, that like prime operating window that says like, hey, I'm ready to fully show up. I'm ready to be here like as I am and dominate the world. Of course we can't do that. When we're coming from like this disembodied place, our body is just saying like, no, I am not, as you were saying before, Selena, I am not gonna do this anymore. And our brain is like forced to surrender to the body and say like, oh, okay, I have to listen to you now. I have to respect that right now you're not gonna show up for me. Where's that landing for you right now? Do you feel like this is true?
Oh, so true. Of like, every time we stuff something, that is really where we're narrowing our window of tolerance. Because every time we address something and every time we go through an emotional cycle, every time we actually feel those things, that builds resilience, that builds our window of tolerance. But we've had to stuff a lot this year. Like, COVID is a reality. Job loss for lots is a reality.
Yeah.
All of these things are realities that we don't get to hold. So that stress is still always going to be there. I'm still nervous to go to the grocery store and I have all my hand sanitizers and stuff. That stress isn't going away anytime soon. And to have external stressors, for me personally, like the first instance was working with somebody that I was like having some trouble with, and it was just like we couldn't get through this, like we were just rubbing heads a lot. And I was like, how do I get off this project? How do I get anywhere? And there was lots of no's external to myself. My body said, it's time to just go, like
Let things go.
And
yeah.
And when I voiced that, I got a no back. Like, that's just not possible right now. And so that I was like, oh my gosh, how do I take a leave? And this is all pre-COVID. And then COVID hit, and it was like interesting for me because it was like because there was this stuff, like this whole collective suffering, my like well of like, oh, I can hold this actually grew in that. So interesting. Mm-hmm. Of like, okay, you're also struggling right now to this person. And I was like, I can hold that, and I can acknowledge that I'm holding that in my body, and I can feel that. And eventually we got out of that situation, but COVID made it better. Crazy. But it was like a second to realize that like other people are struggling with other things too, and that I have a lot of room for compassion and love, and that switch of like, oh, I can just, there's more abundance there. But short-lived. Like if I was still there, if I was still, that would have got, that reserve well runs out pretty quick. So that's the first like instant of I was feeling burnt out this year. And there's so many good things that also were happening at the same time. Like, I'm so thankful to have the Let Your Body Lead cohort in that to guide me through that. I remember talking to you about this earlier this year. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
And yeah, it's just so good to move through that with people. How's this resonating for you?
You bring up a great point that I want to bring to the surface. And that's like, And I texted this to you yesterday, actually. I was like, yeah, like people need people to heal, you
Yeah.
know? Like, wow, when you talk about collective suffering, it was like you were facing this, like, butting heads with this coworker, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, actually, we have like this shared experience right now. You and I are both kind of in the hole in this. How can we make this better? Like then we can come from a place of like opportunity in that, because we're both facing the resistance. So it's like we're in the resistance. We both get to this place of acceptance of being in the resistance, and then we can see the opportunities that can come from that. But we can't just like jump to the opportunities when we don't feel supported, when we can't like see above the trees in the forest, right? It's just like, gosh, I can't see my way out of this. I can't see an escape. But when we're in the opportunities realm, it's like, now I can see, oh, we're in this together. Here's the way out. Here's what we can do.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Hawkins' law or map of consciousness. But basically it says there's in our emotional scale, there's different energetics to our emotions. And what you just illuminated, repeating that back to me, is when I was in that, like, I need off this team, my body is saying no more, no more. I was in this place of force. And so that means like shame and guilt and all of these like lower level emotions that just make us feel ugh. So you might know this as like apathy and anger
Yeah.
is a good one.
Fear.
And then the COVID kind of was like took me out of those things for a second to almost compartmentalize those to be dealt with later, so I could come back to like some courage and some joy and some love. And that energetic just that's more power energetic, so it just moves you forward through that and in a more holistic way. We need both of those types of forces. But that helped me get through the first part of COVID, helped me get through the that situation. And then I have still been untangling those other emotions. Like we always have to come back and revisit all of the things that other things brought up for us if we compartmentalize. But it's a tool that we have, which is so amazing. Our bodies are just so freaking amazing. Like that they can help us compartmentalize like that and get through those things.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's really just reinforcing this idea that like our bodies are here to protect us. They're there for us, like, they're helping us get through the really difficult times like that we've been through this year. And that we're all using like different things to cope with emotions too, and to cope with things. I talk a lot with my work with clients that like, yes, we can use food to soothe, we can use food to seek comfort. And I think when we're in this phase of burnout, like you're talking about, and if burnout was maybe like, perpetuated by feelings like you're saying of like shame and anger and feeling victimized, right? Like we can really, that can bring us to a burnout state like really quickly, because you're right, there's not a lot of like joy and bliss there. It's just like a really hard time. So during those really hard times, we need things to cope. What have you done this year to like maybe cope with that like really difficult time? I know that we talked about like using food to heal, using people to heal. Feel free to like elaborate on that, or like other things that you've done, or maybe it would recommend to others to do if they're like in a stage of like burnout right now.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I want to like draw, I have a picture of myself actually to remember all of this after moving through this hard time and actually getting that yes of like, okay, I'm off to a new project. This project actually wrapped really beautifully, and off to this new thing. And through that, there was so many things I was doing to cope with that. A lot of them, knowing what I know about health too, I really tried to be aware of my coping mechanisms. And I believe you early in the pandemic were like, if you need to eat to cope, it's okay. Like, and I was like, oh, thank you for that permission.
Yeah.
I have all these amazing like people that I would actually talk this through about, and like, let's go for a walk and talk about this, or let's sit down and talk about this. but yeah, definitely was like, I can't remember exactly what I was eating at the time.
Yeah.
But I do have a picture that says, just going into the body stuff, of inflammation in my body, which is cortisol, which is a healing chemical to help you heal. So if you get a cut, you're going to get cortisol. I hope I have that science right. Was causing inflammation in my body. So my body was actually giving me what I needed to get through that. And I really had to be aware of like, oh, my joints hurt a little bit more, or my skin feels a little bit inflamed. But after that release, I actually found that like the cortisol and the inflammation went down in my body. And it was like just being aware of that, and to use that as a tool of like, hey, my body's feeling really inflamed right now. I
Yeah.
wonder why.
It's like a
And am I
response to
eating
stress.
inflammatory foods or is it something else, right? So I don't know if this is making sense, Alicia, but I
No,
would
I
love to
hear
hear
you.
you.
Yeah, like I think the inflammatory foods conversation, like that's difficult because I think all foods like are cool. You know what I mean? Like we can eat whatever types of foods. The inflammation though is like the response to maybe even like the greater thing being like the stress, being like the stuff that we're trying to hold or the triggers, right? Like you mentioned like cortisol release. Like of course we're going to secrete more cortisol if we're in a fight or flight state outside of the window of tolerance, or like if we're constantly being triggered or like constantly disassociating with the body, like saying, like imagine like when you're saying like, oh, like, you know, my we both put our hands like on our cheeks, like, you know, our face feels like tight or different. Maybe is that something that you experienced? You put your hands on your
Oh,
cheeks like this,
oh yeah, like I felt like there was
like
uh,
tension.
water retention in my cheeks. There was inflammation in my cheeks. They get just puffier when I'm
Yeah.
stressed, especially long-term stress. And I think diet culture would tell us, oh, what am I eating wrong? And there's some to that. But if we ignore the part that says, oh, I'm actually really stressed at work and this is really stressing me out, or
Mm.
my relationship is really stressful,
Yeah,
or then we actually get to the root of the problem. Like
exactly.
there's diet culture would say, let's throw some pills at that. Let's throw some diet at that. Let's throw this at that instead of dealing with the root. And
It's
it's
so
like,
true.
Alicia, you're probably like, yes, preaching to the choir right now. But we need to like, but it does show up in our body, and everything that it's interesting, diet culture and weight stigma and all of those things tell us that like anything to do with our body is about food and diet and exercise and that piece. And it's like, no, our body is responding to a lot of things right now. Our body is our friend. Like, thank God my body gave me cortisol to get through that. Like I needed
Yeah.
that to do anything, right? Like, yeah.
Question for you, Selena. Do you feel like people turn to diets and dieting ways to cope with bigger things that aren't feeling right in life?
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I think, and it's interesting because we seem to judge what's better way to cope. We judge our coping mechanisms so hard. Um, for example, I know people that were like working out a whole lot more. Like that was their coping mechanism. And to you and I, that looks like, oh, you're in hyper arousal and you just need to burn off that energy of like that survival mechanism. That's what it looks like to me. Because I felt that. I know what that means to like
Mm,
want to go for a run after a really stressful meeting.
sure.
Um, I felt that. And so that's a coping mechanism that we might look at and be like, oh, she's so fit right now. Or they're so fit. He's so fit.
I
Like,
should be running.
I should be running. Look at like,
Yeah.
and then you're like, okay, is it getting unhealthy now? Right? Like, we could do things too extreme that become unhealthy.
That leads to
And
burnout.
yeah, that
You
leads
don't
to
keep running. you know,
I
if
think
it's not feeling supportive. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like if it's not for a purpose that feels, you
good.
know, like it's actually a coping mechanism that's feeling like it's actually helping you cope, you won't keep doing it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
And
That's
then,
burnout.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm one of those people that I've grown a lot of my awareness around food in the last like probably 6 months. So after the fact of this, but I'm definitely one of those people that's like, when I'm stressed or when I'm low energy because of an external factor, like at work, or I'm just not feeling engaged, I'll go to the kitchen, I'll look around, probably grab a snack, let me have a little something. And I've
Yeah.
grown the awareness around that of like, was I actually hungry? Or was I just saying I was hungry because this stressful thing happened, or this thing kind of popped me out of my window, or popped me a little
Yeah.
higher? Like
Yeah.
it's good to have that awareness of like, oh, I'm eating because I'm doing this. And
I'm triggered.
hey, yeah, do I need this food to help me come down from that trigger? Would this help me come down or go back up, bring me back to my window? Yeah, it really would. That's okay.
Yeah. And that's
But
okay.
it's like it's the eating and the things that we do without realizing it, that it's coping mechanism. That's when it gets not healthy, right? Like that's when it
Yeah.
gets like and doesn't feel good, right? Like
Yeah.
if I go and binge something, and like I think you said this to me, I'm not a huge binge eater, but um if I go and binge something in my kitchen, like I go eat a loaf of bread or something like that because I really want the carbs, or I go do this, you're gonna feel it the next day. You're gonna feel not good. Just like I go back to this example of like working out. If you work out too hard because you're coping, it's gonna hurt. You're gonna be sore. You might even have trouble walking the next day. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if you've ever done stairs and you're like, maybe I pushed a little too hard. Like we just
Yeah.
need, and then you're burnt out. Like you can't do those things, right? And then you
Yeah.
can't do those normal things you do in your life that you need to do every day, right? So
Yeah. And it's like when we judge ourselves for doing either of those things, like for, as you were saying, like eating the loaf of bread, or when we judge ourselves for binge eating, or when we judge ourselves for like running too much, like coming back to this place of like awareness versus judgment, I think is like a great conversation that you're bringing to the surface of like, great to be aware of like, even after the fact. Usually during the fact, we're not completely conscious, or maybe we're a little bit disembodied. We're not really seeing like how the body is responding to the thing. We're not really conscious, especially in like maybe a binge eating experience. There's not like the consciousness of the body in that. It's kind of a chaotic moment. Maybe the same during your example of running too. Kind of chaotic, right? We're responding to a trigger in some way, and of course we are, right? Like what you're saying is like earlier in the episode was like, you know, of course we're responding from being in this fight or flight state. This is what we're trying to do to cope. Judging that only keeps us in a disembodied place, right? Now we create a narrative around why we're doing the thing, and that can further burnout, right? Instead of what you're saying right now of like having this awareness coupled with compassion of saying like, oh, I did this thing because I was trying to get more into an embodied place. Food can be something that can keep us actually within our window of tolerance. It's like, oh, this can be the thing that gets me back into like feeling in my body rather than being disconnected from our body. Would you agree with that?
yeah, food, exercise, all of these
Yeah.
things can be things that keep us in our body, in our awareness, and in that window of tolerance, in that peak state. Um, and that's amazing that we have these tools to do that. And going back to that energy shift of like, sometimes when I was like so into this, like I need off this, like the answer was I need off this work, I need a new project, I need to get out, like me and this coworker just need some space, like like I was so in that nothing could have brought me out other than something so big, right? That like I can sympathize of like, and I can empathize of like, you're so in your own thing at the moment that you don't realize everything else that you're doing, because this one thing has your attention. And that's kind of what, like, that's what burnout is like. That's what energy fatigue is like. Is like you only have attention for one thing and you're fixated on that one thing. So
Yeah.
then, and it breaks your awareness with food. It breaks your awareness with exercise. It breaks your awareness with other things. And then yeah, that can be the catastrophic thing for health of like, you can be in this constant state of stress or whatever and feel all that inflammation. And inflammation is great, but you don't want it for long term. Like inflammation is there to
Yeah.
heal, but you don't want it for months on end. Like that's when it gets
Right.
dangerous, right? Like,
Yeah. It kind of seems
so
like, you've got this car that's got like a tank of gas. And it's like you're so stressed, you're so like in the head spin, and life is going by so fast, and all of a sudden that car runs out of gas. And that's like what burnout is to me. It's just like you've run out of gas, you've run out of, your body can't handle the stress, your body can't handle the anxiety or a situation, and it's just like ran out of gas. And here's the best part is that thank God that car ran out of gas. We need
thank
to
God.
reevaluate. We got to stop being fixated on that one thing and kind of zoom out and say, like, how is this affecting me and my life? How did I reach this place of running out of gas? Right? How could I have let myself run out of gas? We actually are forced to pause, forced to step back, forced to reflect and see, holy cats, what happened here? That can be the best thing for us. It doesn't seem like it in the moment, but if we actually can acknowledge that and press pause on life and reevaluate, that can be a really powerful thing.
And just like me in that story,
Right.
COVID was me running out of gas. And it looks different. Running out of gas looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
And COVID was running, and then you'll sit there and like, oh my God, what's happening for a second? And then you're gonna sit there and be like, oh, I have all this compassion for myself, and I have all this love for everybody right now
Yeah.
that will get me through, and it's gonna be okay. Like, I'm gonna find a way through this. It's gonna be okay. After taking a breath, just being like, oh, we can do this.
You know what? Because it's like through recognizing those lower energies, as you were talking before, recognizing the victimization, the anger, the fear. It's like, oh, now we can tap into this other stuff of like, oh, I can invite more love into this now. It always
Yeah.
still exists. It's all been there the whole time. But it's
Mhm.
like that perspective isn't gained when we're in the rat race, when we're like, our car is going so fast, we're not realizing we're running out of gas until it's like, wow, like for me and in my story, I shared like in the first few episodes of just like hitting diet bottom of being like in treatment for an eating disorder. Gosh, I ran out of gas. Probably the best thing that could have happened in my life. That was severe burnout. I hit burnout months before I realized I hit burnout. Like, it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, we ran out of gas. I'm sure you can relate to that. And what you shared in your story earlier as well is like, gosh, like burnout, we were on the verge of burnout for a
Yeah.
while. And then we hit burnout. And then we could access all of this new perspective and new compassion and love through that.
And you know what? We're all gonna burn out. It's gonna happen.
No, it's true that.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And just like love your body, love yourself, love the people, love everything, and be grateful, because yeah, you're gonna burn out. And guess what? The more you burn out, the better you get at not burning out. The better you get at saying, hey, my car the light just came on. Maybe I need to like pull over. And we're running out of time here, but I have a story on that of like later this year. I had some loss. I lost my horse, and it was like, okay, Selena, if you don't take a break, you will burn out like you did earlier.
Your light went on.
And it's like, okay, I'm gonna take the rest of the week off. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do work this week. I'm just going to lay in bed, and that's going to be okay. And let that be okay. And yeah, that's how we get better at managing energy, is like actually like looking at the times when we were like, oh, I didn't manage very well right now,
Right.
but I have compassion to say I can do better. And
Mm.
I know the signs, and I might not get it perfect every time. Like I still might burn out again,
Mm-hmm.
but I can gain that awareness. And that's what resilience is
That's
too.
what resilience is. I was just going to say exactly
Right?
right. And if we can get better at listening to the body, we can build more resilience. We don't have to react in a way that feels, that feels well, gosh, I mean, of course, I go back into saying, of course, we react, right? Like if we haven't built that resilience, if we're totally denying the body, we're going to be in a disembodied place. But the more we burn out, then maybe the more we realize what our body needs. And then the more we can listen to our body in a maybe more proactive way than reactive way, we can find ourselves kind of jumping back into how we want to show up a little bit sooner rather than waiting for the world, collapsing, maybe rather than just collapsing. You're right. Like when that gaslight goes on, we can say, oh, I have to focus on my body's needs. I've been disconnected for a while. I got to jump back in.
Mhm.
How can I nourish myself today? What kind of movement might feel good today? How can I invite more love and compassion in and softness for myself today? All of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, as we gain that awareness, and I'm just both of our work is about gaining that awareness
Yeah.
of those things that are like signs of like, this isn't, I'm getting tired, I'm getting fatigued, I'm getting to that place of burnout. We get more awareness, and we can actually keep, instead of like, oh, my gas light is on, I'm at 50%. What can I do to fill up now?
Yeah.
Or I'm at my family with gas is always like, keep it above that quarter line, keep it above that quarter line. And that's what we should be doing with our health. We shouldn't be
Right.
waiting for the gas to run out to say, but sometimes we have to. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's the only way out of things, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes it's the gas light, and sometimes it's that halfway marker, but we need to trust ourselves no matter where we're at. If we need, I think I need a little filling up right now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
And using positive coping mechanisms to like fill up. You're so right. Like people need people to heal. So like maybe we need people. Maybe we need, support during that time. And that's so important.
Yeah.
Selena, there's so much wisdom that you shared here today on the show. I just thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience in burnout and ways that we can cope to either keep us from reaching burnout or when we're in burnout, and how burnout might be the best thing for us, and building more acceptance and knowing that like we're going to burn out and it's going to make us better. And just kind of realizing that, and it's going to suck and we're going to get through it, and we can get through it maybe together collectively. We're all maybe facing a sort of burnout right now nearing the end of 2020, and how are some ways that we can just fill ourselves with more love and compassion for that? That's what I want to leave listeners with today, is like, how can we recognize maybe this tenderness that we're feeling right now? I think tenderness is just a word that's been so true for me lately, like just feeling a little bit feely and tender and kind of broken and kind of just open. And how can we invite more compassion and love for ourselves in that? Maybe even if we're in burnout, how can we get into our bodies more so we can live back within our window of tolerance to feel like we can show up as, the people that we truly are, in all of the parts of ourselves. So Selena, is there any like last words of wisdom that you want to share with women, maybe in burnout or facing burnout right now?
Yeah. I just feel called to say, like, if you're facing burnout right now, it's really, I'm see you in that it's hard to get out of. It feels like the world is on your shoulders, and that's okay. And I see you in that, feeling called to say that. And I'm here to support you if you need help out. And let's just take a breath together, Alicia. I feel like we just need a collective breath, and I invite all the listeners to just take a really deep breath in
Yeah.
And exhale with a sigh. Our breath is always there for us. It's an amazing thing.
It really is. Thank you
Mhm.
for that, Selena. Taking a pause and taking a breath and knowing where we are is okay. I appreciate that so much. If someone does feel like just so drawn to you, and I know I do, you know, like the energy that you bring to this show is just like a warm hug. Thank you for that.
I'm all
Yes.
about those warm hugs.
Oh, thank you. Where could they reach out to you? Where could they find you? Can you just share a little bit about maybe your
Yeah,
ability to provide any support for somebody who's facing burnout right now?
the best way to get a hold of me right now is to come over to my Instagram, which is at Luna Terra Soul. So Luna, Terra, like the earth, and then soul, like the thing we all have in our bodies, is the best place. You can also email me at Selena at lunaterrasoul.com. .ca.com.
Yes, I just emailed you from there recently. I can confirm.
.com.
Selena at lunaterrasoul.com. Thank you so much, Selena, for being here today. I hope that, yes, for anybody who's facing burnout right now, oh, that you can just honor your body in whatever way feels supportive, adding in a little bit more compassion and love. And we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this year together.
Yeah.
Um, and oh gosh, if you're feeling like this year was just fine for you, that's also welcome too, right? Like, heck yeah, we're here to celebrate and to just feel all of the feelings. So like, so it's all so welcome. And thank you for so much for being here with us at the kitchen table, Selena, and everyone listening. And we look forward to seeing you on next Monday's episode. Talk
Yes.
soon, everyone.
Thanks.